River Network's Coffee Lunch Roundtable. We have a third one coming in March, which we'll talk about at the end. What we are hoping to get out today is once again an opportunity for you to learn from colleagues across the country about how they took their fundraisers and made them virtual events, and also have an opportunity to ask these experts questions, share your own stories with other peers through the chat box, learn best management practices if there is such a thing right now for transitioning your in-person event to a virtual fundraiser, and provide any guidance that you may need. If you came in and you're in the middle of planning an event, you just have a couple of questions or would appreciate an opportunity to think through some ideas with people. We want to make this as interactive as possible, but we're going to be using the chat for the most part for that interactivity so that we can provide as much content as we possibly can. We have three presenters that are joining us today. We have Mary Robertson, the Director of Development for WEMIAC, Casey Laycock, Director of Development for Cahaba River Society, and Katie Shaddix, also with Cahaba River Society. And they're going to take the time to introduce themselves as we get into the presentation, but I did want, for the purposes of this virtual format, you're going to see lots of beautiful faces on the screen. I wanted you to be able to associate those faces with who is speaking and who is part of your presenting team today. So let's get to introductions, shall we? So my name is Brenna Goggin. I am the Mid-Atlantic Leadership Development Manager with River Network. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am on the ancestral lands of the Nanacogla and Lenape. My fellow colleague, Hannah Maiko. Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks, Brenna. Hi, everyone. My name's Hannah. I'm River Network's Community Organizing Associate. I use she, her pronouns as well. And I'm joining from Grand Rapids, Michigan, which are the occupied lands of the Odawa and Peoria tribes.
Thank you, Hannah. So if you could, for folks that are joining us, please take the moment to follow Hannah's instructions and put your information in the chat box so that we can hopefully build some connectivity through today's presentation. And then going back to the beginning slide, for those that were able to see that when you joined, share an example of any creative ways that you have seen facilitators use to build connectivity, to build in engagement opportunities into presentations. I don't know about you, but I feel like my head is swimming with the new opportunities that are coming out, from Jamboard to Padlet to polls.com to, but I'm finding them incredibly fun to learn and play, and find that it's really nice to build in those opportunities for folks like me, who are somewhat on the introvert spectrum and don't necessarily want to be out in the crowds or even have their face on screen. I would much prefer something like a Padlet or a Polls to share my experiences or information. So just to frame today's conversation, there was a time before March of 2020 where nonprofit organizations relied on big events, galas, as a huge item in their annual budget. Why, you may ask? Well, it's kind of an easy ask for board members. I've heard this said a couple of times that board members will ask people to buy tickets any day of the week and twice on Sunday before they will ask for a single dollar. So boards often like virtual events for that reason. They're a lot of fun and allow for organizations to do something outside of the box. Some people would even say mission drift a little by hosting dress-up parties, paint by numbers, what have you, that wouldn't necessarily fall within their typical mission. It is a substantial part of the budget, which usually makes for reliable dollars that you can count on, especially if you do the same event over and over again. You know realistically how to project for that purpose. However, what we were finding amongst many of our organizations is that as these events continued on, many of them forgot what the original intent or purpose was to them. It just became routine, a standard practice that you planned for every single year, which meant that organizations weren't necessarily taking the time to critically examine whether or not the event should continue the way that it was, and or if modifications or changes were needed. And then March 2020 happened. A lot of you saw your colleagues as you were walking out the door on a Friday, and on Saturday you learned that, at least for the foreseeable future, you were not going to see those colleagues again, or were asked to come in and collect your information and begin working from home. This provided an opportunity and an interruption, maybe for some a much needed interruption to that routine of hosting the same event over and over and over again every year. Because suddenly now you had a choice of, do you continue your event but you just transition it to a virtual platform? Do you cancel the event? Do you try to move it in hopes that the world would have reopened? And so today we have examples of organizations that went through that thought process, and they're going to share with you their lessons learned, some things that they would recommend, and how they're taking what they learned from 2020 and implementing that into 2021. So I am going to now turn it over to Mary. Mary, go forward.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Robinson. I'm the Director of Development here in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the West Michigan Environmental Action Council. We are 52, possibly 53 this year, year-old advocacy, environmental advocacy and education council. We work really hard with volunteers in an 8-county area in West Michigan. Let's see, things about me. I've been with WMEAC now 7.5 years, which is a long time in the development world, but it's been a really great fit for me. And it's just down the street. So before, in the before times, I could just walk down the street to go to work, which was a really, really nice thing to have. Grand Rapids and where I live is on the lands, the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabeg people, who are the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi, the people of the Three Fires. I want to tell you a little bit about our 2020 Blue Tie Ball. Our 2020 Blue Tie Ball was scheduled for April 22nd, Earth Day. I had twisted the arms of quite a few people here in Grand Rapids so that I could have that day because it was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So we were really excited. We were well on our way to planning. We had about 3/4 of our sponsors in. We had sold 2/3 of our tickets. And on March 13th, we met and decided that we needed to start working remotely. And then that was on a Friday. And then the official state shutdown came a few days later. And I don't know if you can see the picture that I put up there, but that's how I felt at that point, because it was 5 weeks before the Blue Tie Ball. And there was just this huge, like, what do we do? What do we do? So I spent the first week of shutdown researching everything I possibly could on the internet. Luckily, there were a few organizations who had actually very quickly switched to virtual. I mean, we had to make this decision. Are we going to cancel this event and refund all this money? Are we going to postpone the event and win? Or are we going to change to virtual? There really wasn't much out there, but there were some organizations, and I talked to my colleagues, and we decided that we could create a virtual event. It wasn't going to be fancy, but we thought that that would be that was something that we could do in 5 weeks if we moved really intently. I have to say that at this point that my intern, because I'm a one-person development office, my intern who went to a local college, was also in 1 week, had his classes moved virtual, lost his apartment, which was a college apartment, lost his job, and was required to move home across the state. So I was working with him virtually as well. We made the decision. We told our board members, we realized that we made this massive list of things we had to do, and really the first 2 things we had to do, we had to talk to our board members. They were like, okay, go for it. We met with our planning committee, and we pulled in every other WEMEAC staff person that we could, sketched out the structure for the event. But really one of the very first things we did was we communicated with our sponsors and ticket holders. And this is how we didn't start out to create a virtual event. So we really got on the phone, got on our emails, explained to everybody what had happened. Everyone was reeling. And we were incredibly lucky. We did not lose a single sponsor. We lost 1 ticket holder who had just lost her job. So we were cool with that. And we gave people the opportunity to buy virtual tickets, and we had a whole lot of people who did buy virtual tickets after that. Because we were worried about this possible shutdown, we had actually held our venue and catering checks. They were due just about the time the shutdown happened. So we didn't actually send them. So we were really lucky in that way. We saved a whole lot of money, sadly for them, but not so much for us. But then we really decided, how is this going to work? And what we decided, we had to decide who would speak at the event, how to facilitate the videos. We had to refine that schedule. And then we had to also refocus the sponsorship benefits to reflect social media changes, because clearly the sponsors weren't getting tables. We did charge the same amount, Karen, for the virtual ticket as for the in-person event, because we didn't know any better at that point. I mean, we literally were just like, well, they're going to get the same content, but not the same food, which is true. The good thing is that we also made sure that everybody understood, all of our ticket holders and our sponsors understood that they got 100% of the tax write-off, rather than the less than because of the food and whatever. So next slide, please. So this is what we ended up doing. We decided that we would run our event over 4 days, because we were going to do an online auction. And so we said, well, we'll just stretch this out over 4 days. We used, for a platform, we used the WEMEAC website and our social media channels. We did not go with an outside platform. Had I had more time, I definitely would have had the time to research and find a platform that would have integrated things better, but this worked pretty well, and didn't cost us anything. So our structure was that we kicked off with an email each day at noon, telling people what was going to happen that day. We also did the same thing with social media. We always included how and where to access the Blue Tie Ball, and also how to access the online auction. By the way, we used an online auction group called Rally Up. They were free, they were simple to use. It did take a long time to get the money from them. It took like 90 days in case there were arguments with somebody who said they didn't buy what they bought. But we did eventually get that. What we would do every day is we would add content to the website. So we started off with, the welcome, mission, award presentation, music, friends, and games. And so each day we added to it. So that's kind of how we did it. So by the end, we had a great deal more on the website than we did initially. And that's how we kept people interested. Next slide. The players, we had our planning committee who had been very, very engaged. Oh, Dee asked, what did we do for music and games? We had the musician who was going to play our cocktail hour music. He was an acoustic guitarist. I just asked him if he would be willing to do one of his songs. He did two, and he videotaped them. I mean, he, taped them and sent them to me, so we were able to insert them, which was really nice. And then we did a, oh God, what did we do for the game? My brain just completely froze on what we did for a game, but it was kind of we were asking, trivia questions. We did a trivia game, and that was kind of super fun as well. We did that on Earth Day, like Earth Day trivia. So our budget, Rich asks, how did our budget change from in-person to virtual? We made about the same amount of money, and they, because we didn't have to spend as much on the outside stuff. So ultimately our net was about the same. Actually, it was a little bit better, but that was only because we didn't have much of a layout. So we used our planning committee up. I have to be really honest, once we went virtual and things had to move so fast, we used them less than we had been using them before, because they didn't have nearly as much. They didn't have as many things to do. I mean, the auction items that we had were pretty much the auction items we were going to get at that point. And obviously they didn't have a day of function. Our communications and marketing team gets incredible props. They did a huge amount of work in switching over sponsorship benefits and then actually running. They were the ones that really made sure everything happened every day. The board stepped up. They were willing to make videos, and I'll tell you, we did not use professional videographers. We just said, get your phone out and here's what we want you to talk about. And then we also had a lot of community supporters. We reached out to the mayor, to business leaders, to other influencers to do little 30-second videos that were really kind of this is why you should give money to this organization. So we kind of had the big videos, which were about the mission and the programs and that kind of stuff. And then we had these little tiny videos that were interspersed. Yeah, we actually used Kahoot for our trivia game. And that was very popular. Beth asks, what ways did we highlight our sponsors? We did a huge amount on Facebook and Instagram, highlighting the sponsors over actually probably a 2-week period. So they got a lot of time, and we have a really big, for a nonprofit, we have a really big set of followers. We're at about 16,000. So a lot more people than they would have gotten in a regular gala sort of thing. So those were our players. And let's see. And I didn't put the staff on, but obviously everyone there are only 8 of us anyway at WEMIAC, and everybody was super engaged with that. I caught a note about that Katie put on about doing videos. Yeah, we did the videos several times. Those were hard to do. That was probably the hardest thing to do to get those right. So next slide. Yeah, here are my takeaways on all of this. Do your research. Ask anyone and everyone you think of. Might know more. There were so many things we didn't know that we were just making up as we went along. And now, if you're going to do a virtual event, you should have the time and the bandwidth to find out sort of everything. And there are some really terrific platforms and some really good MCs. And we did use our MC as well. So he was willing to play along, even though he wasn't sure how this was all going to work, but it worked out pretty well. Be nice to your communications team, because they are doing it all. I helped them we created this detailed day-by-day map and schedule of what was going to go on. It was just incredibly detailed. Tell stories. I've seen a lot of virtual events where people get up and they talk for a really long time about the mission. But what people really need to hear are stories about how these people's dollars or volunteer time are going to change the world, are going to affect this mission. So less on the overall big stuff and more telling stories. Guerrilla videos do work. Don't script them. Do not script them. Just give people, give them a sense of what they're supposed to be doing, and then just allow them to redo it as many times as it takes. And encourage them not to let their 9-year-old hold the camera, because it tends to go like that a lot. But people were super gracious. We netted about $19,000. That's from Trish, which was, again, this gala has never been a huge part of our budget. But I took it from losing money to $19,000, so I thought that was okay over a few years. Yeah. So anyway, other questions?
Mary, there was one question in the chat that Dee asked, did you highlight sponsors on the Zoom meetings with their logos aside from just on social media?
No, because we didn't even start using Zoom until like May. We were still using Google Meet. We had literally, I mean, yes, we knew about Zoom, but we had literally never did it, had never done it. Our content was all on our website, and I think it's still there. So yeah, it was recorded. Yeah, all of our content was recorded. We did not do anything live. So we just couldn't. In 5 weeks, we just couldn't pull that off. Maybe if we'd had a professional auctioneer or MC, but ours was a volunteer one, and we just couldn't wrap our heads around doing a live thing. I will say that this year we're going to take our Blue Tie event back to a live event at some point in the next little while. There's some conversation about dates now, but we'll be doing some Facebook chatting as well with that. So like Facebook Live with it, at least. Thank you, Dee. It was, we were pretty pleased with how it came off, but we all needed more than a little bit of vacation time after we got it done.
Mary, there was one other question. It was a second part to Trisha's question about how much money did you net with your fundraiser. Her second follow-up was roughly how many people participated in the event as far as ticket sales and donors.
I think in terms of ticket sales, we probably had 150 people who bought tickets. And then because of the 4-day format, people, you know, came in and out. But then we opened our auction up to everybody. Anybody who got our emails could sign up for the auction. And that was interesting because we got a lot of people who would never buy a ticket to a gala, but they wanted to play the auction. So that was an interesting learning. That was a big learning. Even doing the online auction, our auction had always just been an in-person auction. So yeah.
Oh, that's a good question from Rich. How did you avoid access sharing by a ticket holder and non-ticket holder using your website and Facebook?
We honestly didn't care about that. I mean, honestly, we just didn't. We at that point, you know, we thought, well, you know, this is a chance for everybody to, you know, see what it's all about. And maybe we'll see people coming out this coming year, or, you know, in the coming months that would not have in the past. I mean, we know there are people, heck, we're all environmentalists. There are people who just won't go to parties and, you know, pay a big ticket amount to go to a party. And then there are people who will. So yeah.
So you kind of framed that ticket sale more as just a donation rather than as
access to the event. It was. We pointed out to everybody that for that ticket sale they would be getting 100% donation. We sent donation. I had already sent out letters to ticket holders, but I resent them all. Our tickets were, I think, $85 for WEMIAC members and $95 for non-members. So, I mean, because it was a pretty traditional gala in the past with a sit-down dinner and a cocktail hour, you know, that whole kind of thing. So that's actually, even for Grand Rapids, that's actually low, on the low end of gala prices. So.
All right. Thank you all for your questions. We're going to transition and let our presenters from Cahaba share their event as well. Continue to put your questions in the chat box, and then we'll do another Q&A after their presentation. If you had any remaining questions for Mary as well, feel free to continue to drop those in and we will circle back.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Casey Laycock and I'm the Director of Development with the Cahaba River Society. And my colleague Katie Shaddix, our Communications Manager, is joining me as well, so you can kind of see her just below me. Before we dive right into how we turned our annual Cahaba River Fry Down into a virtual experience, I'd like to give you just a little bit of background about us. The Cahaba, as we want to let you all know, forms the boundary between the Choctaw and the Creek territories. That's just for reference so that you know that. And we at the Cahaba River Society work diligently to protect and conserve the Cahaba River and its rich diversity of life, which is our mission, as you can see. For those that aren't familiar with our footprint, the Cahaba is Alabama's longest remaining stretch of free-flowing river, and it is a global treasure trove of biological diversity. It's actually only 194 miles long, and it drains an area of about a little over 1,800 square miles. So to many of you, that might seem tiny in comparison to the watersheds that you may represent and protect. However, the Cahaba is one of the most biodiverse waterways on Earth, and it has more fish species than any other river of its size in North America. It's home to 135 different fish species, 139 rare and imperiled species, which include 10 fish and mussel species listed under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. But we also like to speak about our people shed. It's a term that we use here. The communities that depend on the Cahaba, since it is also the primary drinking water source of 1/5 of the state's people, and that touches a lot of lives. So if you can go ahead and go to the next slide for me, Brenna. We are able to support this work through our 3 main goals of inspiring river stewardship, as you can see here, by connecting people with the Cahaba through education, recreation, art, volunteerism. Second, by restoring the river, by promoting green infrastructure and advocating for better policies and practices for clean water, natural flows, and diverse, healthy wildlife and people. And lastly, and most importantly, this is why you're here, by building our impact. And in this area is where we're about to dive in. So Brenda, if you can go to the next slide for me. So as you can see, this is about how we all felt at the moment. Through our fundraisers and main events, we were able to build our impact, and our primary fundraiser every year is our Cahaba River Fry Down, which is a huge community celebration and competitive fish cook-off. It's hosted in the heart of downtown Birmingham, Alabama in early October. So how on earth we were going to host an outdoor event that hosts over 1,000 people in the middle of a pandemic was a bit of a freak out moment. So Brenda, if you can go to the next one. Our first step was not to panic. This was about early March when this was coming down the pipeline for us and impacting us down here. So we took a breath and we realized that everything we had put in motion was about to shift, that we had no control over that. We just let that go. So we had to just realize that all those preconceived expectations that we had for this year and the look of what the reality was of what was happening was not going to occur. So we vented a little bit, got our frustrations out and moved on. And in that next step, within that same week, we started working on how do we go virtual. So if you can go, yeah, thank you, Brenna. Once we did this step back and took a moment to gauge what was unfolding nationally, we immediately began to survey our team internally on what was possible and what was feasible. This was during the month of March going into April. First, we just had to see, how were we as a team going to get through this month, what was occurring with our office and setting up, just moving past those first early months where we knew immediately some of our events were just not going to launch. But this primary fundraiser is the largest one we host each year. What were we going to do? So we asked first, and I encourage you to do this with your own staff, what is feasible? What do we need to pivot to an online event, especially if it's an on-site big event like this, like a cook-off? Does this require more team members, or can we find volunteers or board members that can help us? I think Mary really touched on that, really looking internally within your board members and your volunteers, who can help us with this? What can they do? What are their talents? What are their skills? And how in the world are we going to host cook teams when there's no food that they can taste? And how will teams be judged, awards be determined? How importantly, most importantly, I should say, how do we attract people to visit our pages, teams, and donate? Because as fundraisers, that's the most important part. Are we going to be able to fundraise through this event? Brenda, can you go to the next one for me? So at the same time that we were asking ourselves what we needed to shift to a virtual event, we simultaneously asked what resources we would need to make that happen. Without those in place and having a versatile event management platform, this specifically for us, we needed to have that. And without that, this would not have been possible. So I'm going to talk through this with you. We reached out to our platform host. Katie will touch a little bit about those types of resources. For the way that our event flowed, it really was imperative that we have an event management platform. The team that we used was swell, but there are many out there that are great and have different ways that they can assist you or meet your budget. So I encourage you to do your research on that. So we reached out to them with our predicament and saying, this is what we want to do. What is possible? And they dug in immediately with it, and they were excited to, like, let's tackle this together. And we started looking at what other events that they had hosted or what was out there that we could mimic. Nothing out there was exactly the way we would have done it. There were no events that were cook-offs that were going on virtually. So we thought we were a little crazy even considering this idea, but our event management team was just so encouraging, like this is how we can make it happen, and it helped us to really think outside the box creatively on this. And then we started looking at how we would need to handle and create our event platforms to make it function virtually, new content, video editing, uploading, a lot of what Mary touched on, you know, how are you going to feature all the components of your event that you would usually do on site? How do we attract people to the event again? Should ticketing be free and charged? And what are the pitfalls of either? We did choose to go with complimentary because we really saw that with our teams, they were the ones driving the fundraising on this. And we wanted people to be able to come. And since there was no food, most people would be paying for the food experience. This was more the virtual experience. We just didn't feel like it was fair to them to charge a ticket when we knew that most of the money that was coming in was going to be from donations on the opposite side. So really, we saw this as an opportunity for outreach, new membership, new ways of broadening our reach as much as possible, and hopefully making some donations along the way. We also had to look at how teams were going to showcase their cooking, because typically they would be on site at a railroad park for us downtown Birmingham. When these teams really get into it, they get super pumped and excited and competitive about it and show off their dishes to a panel of judges. Well, here they're having to do it online and no one can taste that dish. So how are they going to do it when none of them had any experience with videography? Can you go to the next one, Brenna? I'm going to let Katie dive into this next slide on the technical resources to consider.
So, hey, I'm Katie Shaddix. I'm the communications manager for Cahaba River Society, and I am the one that manages our website. So my first thought was, like, how are we going to do this? What tools are we going to need? What am I going to have to build and put together to make this happen? And what I found is that a lot of the tools we needed are the same things that we would need for any event. And a lot of the things that we need to do are the same good practices we need to follow for any event, but they became even more important with a virtual event, because with the virtual event, all these things and practices become your event. So like your event website is now your event venue, it's your entertainment, it's your place where you're interacting with your event participants. It is just so much more important than it ever was before. One thing that I find is really helpful is to have a custom URL to make it easy for people to find your event website. That's a good thing to do no matter what, but it is really good when your whole event's virtual, because if people can't find your site, then they can't make it to your event. We've had the URL frydown.com for years and years, and we use that again this year. Your page does not have to be its own special web page. It can also be a sub page on your main website, or if you use an event management platform, sometimes they'll supply you with a web page. No matter what your page is, you can get that URL pointed toward the page where you want it to go. So you can have a quick URL that gets people to the spot where you want them to be. And once you've got that page with your special URL, you want to drive people to it through all of your different channels. So like on your main homepage of your website, it's a good idea to make it really clear for people to find how to get to your event. We had a big, gaudy gold and red banner that would drop down from the top of our homepage. If anybody came to our website while our event was going on, it was really easy to see that, and within one click, they could get to Frydown. We also made sure to list it in places like our Twitter bio, our Instagram bio. We had a Facebook event page that had a link to our big event website. And then all of the posting we did on our social accounts, we mentioned the link to the page where people could go to see the actual event and to donate. You can see our website. That's a screenshot of it here on the left. And so once you get people to the website, the most important thing is to be able to let them give you their money. So you can see we've got big green buttons that say vote/donate. That's how people would support their favorite team. We had all of our different fry teams made videos of themselves and published their recipes, and they each had an individual fundraiser page with their video, their recipe, and they could send out a link to that to their friends, asking their friends and family to vote for them. And you can see down at the bottom of the page, we've got leaderboards that let you know who is doing the best. It lets you know by individual fundraiser and by the team name. Plus, there's also the total raised up at the top. Those are some peer-to-peer fundraising tools that we got through our event management platform. You can have these donate buttons just be like your PayPal donate button where people give and the money just goes into an account and you keep track of it. But one really nice plus of this kind of event management software is having these leaderboards that'll update in real time. So as soon as somebody makes a donation in support of a particular person, you see it on the leaderboard and you know who's ahead. And that really got the competitive spirit going and got our teams into the fundraising. Also really important is going to be your email marketing. This is another area where you're going to want to use it to drive people to your website. So anyone who gives to your event, any of your donors, you want to be sure to collect their contact information so that you can reach back out to them. If there's someone who has never heard of your organization before, then that's somebody good you can cultivate as a donor. You can let them know if their team is getting ahead or falling behind and ask them to donate again and hopefully get them to give even more. We also kept a segmented email list for our team so that we could send them an email and say, hey guys, today is a big day. We've got so many days left in the competition. Be sure and share the link to your fundraising pages, that sort of thing. And so having a good email marketing software, we use MailChimp. There's also Vertical Response, HubSpot, Constant Contact. Just being able to use those well to segment your email list and send really targeted emails is helpful. We also, during our event, sent at least one email a day, sometimes more, letting people know when there was new content that was up on our website and encouraging them to go visit the website and tune in. And then lastly, I have video, which is the most important type of content for you to have on your website. Something like 80% of all internet traffic is people watching video. People like video. For a virtual event, that's going to be your best way to connect with your audience. It's when they can see your face and hear your voice. And it's also rewarded in search results. Your YouTube page will often show up higher in Google search results. Social media sites reward video content. Facebook and Instagram like to have video content and they'll try and show it to more people. I also go into the types of different video content you can have. Our best and most successful video content was getting the teams to make their own videos. It was kind of a risk because we didn't know what quality of filmmaking we were going to get. And some of them were a little lacking. I posted in the comments earlier, if you're asking people to video with their cell phone, be sure to remind them to hold the phone horizontally and not vertically. Otherwise, you get these tall, skinny videos that have black boxes on the side when you try and show them on YouTube or on one of your social feeds, unless it's a video for an Instagram Live, which is a separate story. Instagram Live is an oddball out there, and they like portrait style video. But the content that we did get from our teams that was good far exceeded our expectations. I mean, it was way beyond anything that we expected from our teams. That some of them just really did an amazing job. And by them taking the time to create these videos, it got them really invested in the event and in their own performance and their portrayal. They got really into it. They dressed up in costumes. They told jokes. They were funny. They were engaging. I mean, it was just really good content. And then the friends and family of those people, when they emailed out and said, hey, check out this video that I made, people wanted to tune in and they wanted to see what their friend's doing on screen. And once they tune in, they're on your webpage ready to donate. We did both some pre-recorded video that we released each day during our event, and we did some live streaming, like our award ceremony was live streamed so that you could see both the faces of our judges and the faces of our teams as we were announcing the winners. And we use video conferencing software. We use Zoom to do that, which Zoom can be live streamed onto either a Facebook page or a YouTube channel. And if you guys have any other questions about how we did this, I will be happy to elaborate more. You can ask them in the chat, and I'll turn it back over to Casey to wrap up the rest of her presentation.
All right, so we're going into step 4. Thank you, Katie, for all that. It was really extremely helpful, I know. So this is a step that was critical for us from May onwards, and leading up to and through our event, actually. Managing expectations is key to a smooth transition. And Mary touched on this early on, and I'm going to emphasize it as well. That cost benefit analysis early on is imperative. You really need to do that with your team so that you can manage that expectation of what are we going to make. You're not going to be making what you anticipated. If you do, that's a wonderful surprise, but don't plan on it. Just hope to make a profit at all, if you can, a net from this. So we did a cost benefit analysis early on with a worst case scenario, a best case scenario, and the original plan. So we could kind of compare between those 3 scenarios of what it was going to look like at a moment's notice, month to month, depending on what sponsorships come in or don't come in. We could kind of see where it was going. And then we also looked at the cost of needed resources to pivot to that virtual format. Now, we already had our event management platform in place, thankfully, so that was a cost we didn't have to immediately incur in setting that up. We were already looking at peer-to-peer fundraising platforms 1 to 2 years prior to this, so it made for an easier transition, but there were other resources that we need to consider, like Zoom, and if you want to do a business account, or other types of resources that you might need to go virtual, such as videography equipment, or just having having a camera. Those are things to consider. What expenses you can cut out is also something to consider, and what can you gain in revenue. So we set our ultimate goal for outreach or fundraising, which I touched on earlier, or is it both? We really focused on the outreach because we knew that we might take a hit on this, but we just hope to break even or make a little bit. And if so, then the ultimate gain of outreach, spreading our message and our impact to us was much more important. If we could do that, then we knew later on we have new members, new donors that might come in the door. So that was our plan. But we also had to know what was our breaking point, because at some point, if you're losing money, it is not worth it. So we needed to know what is our exit plan? When do we cancel? If we get to July or August and it's getting worse and worse, do we pull the plug and we just call it? So you need to make sure that you have that in place before you ever proceed. What is your breaking point? When do you cancel? Then we surveyed our event committee members, board, and volunteers for their strengths and weaknesses again in going virtual. We looked at, in the beginning, what talents they had, but now it's transitioning them to say, where can they fit in? Could they help us with a team? Can they help us with videography? Do they have connections when it comes to certain pieces we might need to really make this streamlined? And then we began reaching out to our community. Once we felt very comfortable with where we were at, and I should use comfortable lightly. We were never really comfortable. This was a very uncomfortable situation, but once we felt a little bit more confident that we could proceed with this, we then went virtual and letting our community know, or those that were out there wondering, are you going to do this? I'm so excited for Fry Down. We could then go out through communication, and Katie launched this on letting them know, yes, we're going virtual. Yes, we're excited that we're going to be hosting Fry Down. It's going to be a little bit different this year, but stay tuned, it's coming, and that people could still cheer on their favorite teams and they'd be doing it from home. The more we kept it positive and enthusiastic, the less that we had a lot of that negative feedback, because anytime you change an event that people get used to, you're going to get negative feedback. It's just going to happen. But the more that you can stay upbeat about it, about what are the benefits of this, those naysayers tend to get quieter and quieter as you go along. Brendan, can you go to the next slide for me? So then, and this is a short one for you, but this is a fundraiser's critical point when it comes to sponsorship. And as development officers, our role during this event is making sure that beyond the immediate reaction of how on earth do we raise money during a virtual event, it's also how do I keep my sponsors on the bandwagon? And communication was key from the very first initial weeks that we were experiencing lockdowns. We reached out and called each one with personal conversations, letting them know that we understood the uncertainty that we were all experiencing, that they were experiencing. and letting them know that we understood what was going on within their businesses, and that we just wanted them to stick with us if they could. That actually meant a lot to them, that we were reaching out to them, that we were hearing them where they were at, that they were concerned about their own businesses at the time. And that made a big difference for those sponsors that had already committed to give or had given, that we were offering them the options for either refunding their money, should we opt to cancel the event, or give them the opportunity to have their support go to sponsoring one of our programs, like our Clean Environmental Education Program. That's something that you might consider as well. It's just, if you are in that situation suddenly, know that by giving them options, that they feel that they have control then. They will return to you if they feel like they have control over where their money is being spent. This encouraged them that we also had a plan. Even if it was just a tentative plan, we had something. And we were going to make sure that their money was put to good use and made a valuable impact, and that they would receive credit for it. So once we had determined that we were indeed able to shift to a virtual event, we immediately reached out to them with the good news and a new sponsorship benefit package to showcase how we were going to really elevate and properly recognize their investments in a virtual space. We still anticipated, though, that sponsorships would decline. So we focused our energy on that peer-to-peer fundraising aspect. Our teams are, as Katie mentioned, they really carried it. They made this event successful. So next I'm going to focus on that. So content is a big one. And Katie was my hero during this entire journey that we had. As again, Mary says, keep your communications people happy. I'd be bringing her bottles of wine if I could, as much as I could. But really, around early April, we were already shifting our Clean Environmental Education Program to virtual river adventures and an online classroom experience. So we realized early on that our fry down as well, we were going to need to review all of our content and consider that the entertainment for an online event is going to be provided by those videos and films that we had to create. So we were looking at, what in this lineup do we have? Do we have virtual adventures we can use up from the Clean program that we were doing? Do we have older films that we might be able to update and showcase again that people have totally forgotten about, but they were really beautiful films? Do we need new videos that show our impact and work? And we did. We found that we really needed, it was beneficial for us to go ahead and put in some new impact work videos as well. We even considered the idea of a mini film festival at one point, just what was possible. You just throw it out there. It's like throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks at this point. And through that, we were able to whittle down what were the most beautiful pieces that we could use and create a digest, a weekly digest, because our event did run from Tuesday to Sunday. I think it was like September 28th to October 1st or 4th, I can't remember, but it was 1 week that we did it. So when we launched that first day with a kickoff, and we had our MC, just like Mary, our MC stuck with us. We were so excited. She did a video as well, just launching the event. And then we were able to kind of create this TV digest of different videos that people could then be a part of. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is just I just inserted this so you can kind of see some of the content that we worked with. This is fun for you to kind of get into. I encourage you to do so. Get excited about it. Get creative about some of the content that you can use. Brenna, can you go to the next one for me? All right. Finding that champion. This is really key. Now you're in the final stretch. You can see the finish line, but big hurdles are coming your way. And the key for us was helping our teams to really become the leaders we needed in raising the donations to meet our final goal. And this came through trying to answer all those new questions of going virtual for them. Questions like, these are ones we got: how to create a video, how to upload a video, what should the length be, what should not be, what not to include, making sure to let them know, don't include profanity or nudity or branding. I mean, you think you shouldn't have to add that, but you do need to add that to make sure that does not get included. But they really appreciated it as well, just being able to answer questions for them and hold their hand through this process. Most importantly for us was finding a champion. This person had to feel comfortable rallying the other teams to reach out to their respective communities to support, amplifying our efforts and increasing the amount of votes needed for each team to win one of our awards. The specific award that we use is called the Champion of the Cahaba. This champion also helped amplify our messaging through social media to help garner as many general donations as possible and encourage people to view them. That content that we create, they can snag it and send it on. They're encouraging the teams to do so, grabbing those new videos and sending it out. Can I go to the next slide? I think we're wrapping it up, which is great. So this is just a breakdown of our event, our fry down by the numbers, because some of you may ask, well, after all this work, how did it turn out? We raised over $59,000, and this was huge for us as our first ever virtual fry down. Our community lifted us up to an inspiring level, and our teams were they're just absolutely incredible. We were delightfully surprised at the quality of the homemade videos each team submitted. They were real, they were relatable, they were sincere and heartwarming and informative and creative. I could go on, but we don't have time. But it was just amazing. It really was. And I want to encourage you to never underestimate your volunteers and your teams. They can come up with some incredible pieces, and they will surprise you. To be completely honest with you, though, after doing our cost benefit analysis at the end of the event and after we calculated our expenses from going virtual, we actually made more net revenue from this year's Fry Down event than any other previous year's Fry Down event. And that's simply because we were able to reduce costs from an on-site event to a virtual event. That was completely unexpected, but not entirely surprising. I mean, when you cut out the cost of a huge venue and all the food, you actually can save a lot of money this way by going virtual, but it's got to be the right fit, right event to do so. Some of the details on the logistics that I want to share for you. Our teams submitted their videos to us, as Katie said. Then we would load them onto our event website, and each team did have their customized page for them to send out to their spheres of influence. Once they garnered those votes, they could then win another one of our awards called Crowd Favorite. We did have a celebrity judge panel. People ask, how in the world did you judge it? We still had celebrity judges. They included a panel that usually features prominent chefs, food bloggers, and local radio hosts. So instead of actually being on site where they would taste the food, they watched all of the videos, every video submitted, and they could replicate the recipes in order to determine the more complicated culinary awards like our best overall, best side dish, most creative, and so forth. And so I'm going to go to our next slide, which is our lessons learned. So several of you asked, like, what did you learn from this and what's it looking like for 2021? We are preparing down here because the rollout of vaccines is so slow in Alabama. So we're having to prepare for another virtual or hybrid event season is what it's looking like. So we will be focusing again on featured videos and films and reaching a wider audience. So we were able to, and you might be able to, Katie can talk more about this, but on those videos that you are posting on YouTube channels or whatnot, you can actually see how many people viewed it, what's the length of time they're watching it, pardon me. So you can tell which ones were popular and why, which ones lacked viewers and why, and start beginning to create that new content for this year early on. And calling all sponsors right now is important, and alerting them of the potential for this virtual event, because some of them are asking us that question already too. Are you going to host it? Or are you going to go virtual? And they kind of know the situation as well, but they need to be on board with you right away and what it's going to look like. What are the expectations this year? But we also found that focusing more on that team cultivation and how they are featured and marketed really is key to reaching your fundraising goals. We were just astounded having a champion, having that one person who is so gung-ho. And when Mary talked about storytelling, that really hits home. Having that person say, this is why, in 5 points in a Facebook post, I'm supporting this event. I am the team captain for this event, and I want to let you know, here are the 5 reasons why I'm supporting this organization. That was huge. That was not asked for by us. And yet giving tips and tricks, she took it from there and just ran with it. And that's what people gave to, was the fact that it was a human reaction. It was a human story of what was important to her about our work and our river. and why she wanted to be a team captain for this event. And people just gravitated to it, and they were driven to give because it was real. So just keep that in mind. That is the end of our presentation. I'm going to open it back up to Brenna and any questions that people have.
Thanks, Casey. I think Hannah was monitoring the questions. Hannah?
Yeah, Rich had asked if the 59,000 you raised was your net or your gross amount.
That is a good question. So with our net, it was at 50 to 51,000. So we only lost a little bit on expenses.
That's awesome. And then Chrissy had asked, oh, go ahead, Katie.
Our overhead was extremely low because most of our expenses for the event are usually the venue, the food, the entertainment, and all of a sudden all those expenses disappeared.
And then there was a request from Chrissy to share the FAQ list from your event page. So if that's available, we can send that out with the
I can try to send that to you after the fact. Absolutely. We did it behind a wall. So as soon as a team signed up, I had already created a kind of a hidden page off of our fry down, which was nice then, because even if, God forbid, I get hit by a bus tomorrow, Katie could grab that FAQ from the inside the Swell page and just send it out as a link in an email to them so that the team could see immediately, like, oh, here are the tips and tricks for how to do my page.
Lynn had asked, what did you live stream during the event and how did you do that as far as live content versus pre-recorded?
We live streamed our award ceremony. And Casey, did we do our opening ceremony? Now I can't remember.
Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, we did actually, I think we did live stream the first one. We recorded, oh no, I take that back. We did record, the first one was recorded and not live streamed. It was the award ceremony that was live streamed.
So the award ceremony we wanted to live stream because it was something that was timely and we wanted it to happen live so people could see the reactions of the teams that won and of the judges talking about and presenting the awards. We had other content that was pre-recorded, but we launched it at specific times. We had a set schedule of programming each day. We were using a mix of our own educational content that we created and some video that our partners had already created. And then we also gave people the opportunity to create new content just for Fry Down. So we had a guy that usually does balloon animals for kids. He did a little show and made balloon animals and did his act virtually. And so we had that program to show on Saturday morning so that kids could tune in and see that, and also some face painting and other things like that. And then it transitioned into some educational shows. So those were all pre-recorded, but they came out at set times. And then when we did the live award ceremony, we did that over Zoom so that we could have all the participants there on screen all at once at the same time. And then we streamed that live directly from Zoom onto Facebook. You can also stream it to YouTube, and you could use that YouTube to embed it on your website if you wanted to.
Awesome. Brian had asked after Mary's presentation for like the big key lessons and takeaways. So if each of you might want to share like two of like the biggest takeaways. I know that you kind of reviewed this, but just like summarize for him and his question. If each of you would like to share two big takeaways from your conversion of your events. Mary, if you want to start.
Oh, thanks. Gosh, I would say one big takeaway was, I think like Casey said, is you have to be positive. You have to go, we can do this. And because you can, it just, you're going to have to bring in lots of people to make it happen. So that whole staying positive thing, which, you know, for a development person is pretty easy to do, you know, it's kind of how we roll. The second big takeaway, don't underestimate your supporters. They want to support you, whether that's a business sponsor or, you know, a ticket buyer, or, you know, somebody who's been supporting your organization for years, or just sort of support adjacent and, you know, jumped in because this was something new and interesting for them. So don't underestimate them.
Thanks, Mary. And on the staying positive point, I love that Casey had shared when they first realized they were going to have to convert their event, that they held some space for the staff and the volunteers to vent and voice their frustrations and be like, yes, this is hard. This sucks. We don't want to have to confront this, but like getting that all out, holding that space, and then making that transition to move forward. Because I think that's a really important part too, is like acknowledging that it is hard and that it's going to be quite a trek to make it happen. So I'm glad that she brought that up too, and the staying positive. That's part of that process for sure. Casey, do you want to go next?
Lessons learned. For us, it was eye-opening to see how much that peer-to-peer fundraising really can make or break your event. It's always been a back burner for us. We've known that we needed to focus on this, never had the time to, because we've been so focused on the on-site event that we've never really focused on how do I cultivate the teams and really help them to push to take advantage of this. And that was a huge eye-opener for us of the potential there, the untapped potential for fundraising by doing teams and team rallying around it, where they're reaching out to their own spheres of influence, their own circles of influence, and calling upon them to help with your mission. And it works, it really does. But having that champion to lead that charge is critical, because that's the person in the trenches with those teams that they believe, and they go, oh, well, she's just like me. She's just a volunteer. She's not an employee of the organization. And he or she is willing to get in there and get excited and be that cheerleader for your event. That's one for sure, as well as making time, extend your time frame. For us, we realized with videos, whereas our teams might not sign up, they could have up until like 2 weeks before the event to sign up. We had to backtrack that and go, no. We're going to have so many issues with timing and editing and making sure they have time to video all this and get it to us and download it, which I'm glad that we did, because realizing that some of those videos took 24 hours to upload because of the length of them. For us, for a cooking show, it could be anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. Well, 5 to 10 minutes sounds like it should be a really easy upload on YouTube. It is not. It takes forever versus 30-second or 1-minute clips on YouTube. That's totally different. So that was an eye-opener for us on making sure that you give your, teams or volunteers, if you're doing a lot of video or needing a lot of video, backtrack that time frame at least a month of what your needs are going to be.
Yeah, I will say that was one of the worst things for us, because we literally didn't have that month. We were doing, our people were doing or redoing their videos up to the day before. And luckily, since we had the 4-day period, we were able to get them all in, but that was anxiety city.
Absolutely. We had some videos that just never materialized and that had to be cut from our programming. And for that reason, it helped that we had not published an exact specific schedule ahead of time. We did publish topics, like we let people know on Saturday morning we'll have family fun content and kid-friendly activities, but we didn't say exactly what those things were. And I was really glad, because a few of them just didn't work out.
Katie, did you have any big lessons learned to add to our list here?
Yeah, in addition to what Casey shared, because she summed it up really well for us too. One other thing that I just thought was really inspiring about doing a virtual event was how many people we could reach, because we reached far outside of our geographic area. We normally get people from in and around the Birmingham area, but we have people all over the country watching and donating. And we got over 31,000 views on YouTube. So people were watching and enjoying these cool little videos and learning about the Cahaba. And a lot of them were people that wouldn't have ever been exposed to our work otherwise. So we found that it really enabled us to cast a wide net and reach people that we had never been able to reach with our in-person event.
That's awesome. Rich asked a question that I think we can pose to both Mary and our friends at Cahaba. How much of your gross amount was from donations versus sponsorships? That could be a rough estimate of like a quarter, a third, a half, whatever.
I can tell you in actuals. I'm trying to think off the top of my head and it doesn't want to compute, but in sponsorships, we would typically in a normal year, we would anticipate close to $60,000 to $63,000 in sponsorships to make our event launch. We received only $37,000 in sponsorships, but we made up for that in over $21,000 in donations when typically we might only get $4,000 on site. So that's huge.
Yeah, we were both down in sponsorship and ticket sales because normally our event has between 210 and 225 people. We ended up with about 150 ticket purchases. But our sponsorship, it's sort of roughly equal, but our sponsorship was down because we had some big sponsorships that were in the works that fell through as a result, just because I don't think because there was bad intent, but because people were just overwhelmed at the time. It was all so new and crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mary, your event took place so close to the beginning of this cycle that you had a very different experience.
Different is the word for it. For sure.
Yeah. All right, folks, we've got about 2 minutes left. So I'm going to close down our question and answer period and turn it over to Brenna to wrap us up. But if you have follow-up questions, please do feel free to reach out after the webinar when we send that follow-up information.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you, guys.
So I just want to take a moment to thank our presenters, Mary, Katie, and Casey, for taking the time to share your stories. I'm hopeful that our participants, at least from the chat, found them to be incredibly helpful and valuable as they are thinking through what 2021 is going to look like, and even possibly, dare I say it, 2022. But I hope that some of the key takeaways were that you can transition to a virtual event. It's not as simple as just taking an in-person event and putting it on Zoom, but it can be done as long as you're intentional and thoughtful, and you take the time to communicate both internally and externally, and you set realistic expectations for your team and for your participants. Just a reminder, this session was recorded, and so we will be sharing a link along with the slide deck. And I found a podcast that I thought would be really helpful to add to the information that Katie, Mary, and Casey all shared, which is Joan Gary, creating a 5-star special events in the virtual age. Just gives you some more questions and things to think through as you're looking at making your event virtual. And we do have another roundtable in March that's focused on community-led research. So if you are curious about what community-led research is and how your organization can promote it within your community, check out the link that is in the chat box. Otherwise, I very much appreciate you all coming in and taking the time out of your day to listen to this roundtable. And please don't forget to fill out the evaluation, because those results are incredibly helpful to us as we plan this event. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.